Have you ever been watching the news and felt like you're watching two completely different shows at the same time? One minute it's all about grand strategy, presidents, and international politics, and the very next, it's this incredibly intimate story about a single family. Well, today, we're going to unpack that feeling and explore how those two worlds are really just one and the same.
So let's really dig into this. You've got a headline about a president's foreign policy, and then another about a family's bittersweet reunion. I mean, on the surface, they seem like they're from totally different planets, right? But what if they're not? What if they're just two different windows looking out onto the very same landscape?
All right, first, let's put on our geopolitical glasses. We're talking about the high-stakes world of diplomacy, military power, and the kinds of decisions that can literally change the course of history.
Okay, so the story starts with this headline about a meeting between two world leaders. This is that classic top-down view of conflict, The idea that the choices made by just a handful of people can send massive ripples all across the globe.
Now, what's really interesting here is the language being used. This one quote, just pulled straight from the report, sets up this huge choice. It's a powerful contrast between two very, very different paths forward.
Let's just break that down for a second. Broker peace versus send tomahawks. I mean, this isn't just a turn of phrase. It represents a fundamental fork in the road for foreign policy. One way leads to the negotiating table, the other leads to the battlefield. And this table just lays it out perfectly. On one side, you have diplomacy. That's all the tough, painstaking work of negotiation, treaties, and de-escalation. On the other side, military intervention. That's a focus on weapons and using direct force. They're two completely different toolkits for trying to solve the same problem.
So what this all boils down to is seeing conflict as a kind of giant chessboard. It's all about strategy, moves, and countermoves, and the big picture calculus of national interest. But here's the thing, that's only half the story. Because while all the leaders are moving their pieces around that big board, something totally different is happening on the ground, on a deeply human level. Okay, so now let's completely shift our focus. We're going to zoom all the way in, from that high-level world of policy down to the personal, gut-wrenching reality for the people who are actually living through it. And in that very same news report, the story pivots. It suddenly turns to a story about bittersweet reunions. Just listen to that phrase. It is packed with so much emotion and complexity. It immediately tells you we are not talking about strategy anymore, we're talking about feelings.
Let's just stop and think about that word for a second. Bittersweet. It captures such a profound contradiction, doesn't it? It's the experience of feeling two completely opposite emotions at the exact same time. It's joy, all tangled up with pain. And that right there is the absolute heart of these stories. You have the immense, overwhelming joy of seeing someone you love again, knowing they're safe. But that joy is inseparable from the sorrow, the grief for the time that was lost, the trauma that was endured, and for all the people who will never, ever come home.
And this story of reunions, it taps into something much bigger than just one headline. It's an almost universal human experience that echoes across different cultures and through generations.
What's so fascinating is that these images trigger a deep collective memory in us. It's something that I think a lot of us understand on a gut level, even if we've never personally experienced it.
And this is the memory. The image of a father's return from war. It's a powerful archetype we've seen in movies, in art, in our own family histories for centuries. This is the human face of what happens when a conflict ends.
But that return is never simple. Of course, there's that incredible, immense relief of that first hug. But it also carries the long shadow of trauma. There's the huge challenge of reconnecting with a family that's had to change while you were gone. And always there's that heavy grief for the friends and comrades who didn't make it back.
So we have the strategic view and the human view. How in the world do we put them together? Well, the key is to understand that they aren't separate stories at all. They're just integral parts of one much larger reality. So really, we've looked through two very distinct but totally inseparable lenses. On one hand, you have the political strategy, those big decisions about peace and war that shape entire nations. And on the other, you have the human consequence, the deeply personal stories of reunion and loss that shape individual lives forever.
And here's the real takeaway. To truly understand conflict, you just can't focus on one or the other. If we only see the grand strategy, we risk losing our empathy.
But if we only see the personal story, we risk losing sight of the complex forces that created it in the first place. A full picture demands that we hold both in our minds at the same time, seeing how the moves on the chessboard create the stories on the ground.
And that leaves us with one final question to think about. The next time you're watching the news, just ask yourself, which lens am I using right now? Am I looking at the chessboard, at the grand strategy? Or am I seeing the people, the individuals whose lives are being shaped by every single move? Because seeing the complete picture means you have to see both.